right, we talked about the Americas and how humans settled and started moving into that region, both by land and by sea. And now the last little part of the world is is also one of the most fascinating and interesting, Oceania, right? This huge area of islands that for a considerable time of human history was somewhat of an obstacle in order to spread. But once groups figured out how to navigate maritime navigation techniques using stars, wind currents, ocean currents, wave patterns, were able to navigate pretty much all of this region. One of the greatest sort of migration patterns of all human history. They were able to settle all of these worlds. And here's kind of the sort of what has been broken up, the different regions of Oceania, if you will, Micronesia. We'll look at these all a little bit later in a little more detail. Micronesia, Melanesia, it's usually called. Here's Polynesia, New Zealand, kind of sort of crosses over here. Papua New Guinea, kind of some of these areas. Here's the Philippines and Borneo, Indonesia there. So kind of gives us an idea of what we're looking at geographically. So when and how did people start coming here? Right? And the first peoples that show up in Oceania are these people called the Austronesians. And they're called this because they're a linguistic group. In about 3000 BCE, these Austronesian groups start to move out. I'll show a map in a little bit. We think maybe they were of South China or Taiwan, maybe along rivers. That's where they got their technology of being able to use boats, boat building, familiarity with maritime navigation, and then spread to Taiwan, went down to the Philippines, Indonesia, Madagascar, and then one branch of these Austronesians came to Polynesia. And you kind of see, so when we talked language groups, right, you can kind of see that if they have similar, if there's similar words in different languages, probably came at the same time. So if you look at, say, the word for canoe in these Polynesian languages, Hawaiian it's va'a, right? In Samoan it's va'a. In Tongan it's vaka. In Fijian it's waka. And Maori is also waka. But you can kind of see that these are all similar. This ka sound gets the okina, sort of glottal stop in Hawaiian, right? The va and the wa is very easy. I mean, the va-wa alternation in Hawaiian is still there. So you can see these languages. If you go to Austronesian, you can find all these different, particularly if you go with numbers, family relations, right? You can see these connections within these Polynesian languages, which tell us that at one point, right, they were all related and then spread out over time and space. So this is what they've kind of pieced together, this Austronesian expansion. So about 3000 BCE. Again, it's not fully known totally, but maybe from Taiwan, start to move out to the Philippines. You know, another collection of islands, so they would figure out this boat making navigation technology into the Indonesia areas. And you can see the dates here, 2020 BCE, and then Micronesia was one of the earlier ones. It's another push into Melanesia, down here into Southeast Asia, all the way to Madagascar. So the language of Madagascar is an Austronesian language, similar to Hawaiian there. And then here, kind of move out into Polynesia. Here, make a note here, 800 BCE, and then this cuts off to 780. And we'll talk about why there's a distinction there of that sort of near Polynesia and then far Polynesia is a distinction there of settlement patterns. The last area of Oceania where humans made it to was New Zealand. The last area, about 1200 CE. Here's Hawaii up here. It says 900, but there's some evidence that possibly some earlier waves of people came from Micronesia and settled there as well, and then a second wave from Tahiti, then Rapa Nui, and then this ... over here. This suggests that humans didn't just stop at Rapa Nui, Easter Island, but actually made contact with South America, which there's finding more and more evidence for as we go along. So just kind of to break this down a little closer, here's Indonesia, Southeast Asia, the islands of Indonesia, Malay. So these languages are Austronesian as well. Connected with Southeast Asia, the Mekong River is a major one there. The mixed with there are other groups living here as well. We'll get into Southeast Asia a little bit later. The settlement patterns there, but you can also see this last little group with all the way to Madagascar, 500 CE. They brought bananas, some other foods from Southeast Asia. Bananas then get introduced to Africa, so you can kind of through Southeast Asia, they believe. Here's some famous the baobab trees of Madagascar. And then Oceania, you kind of see the settlement patterns here that people started coming over. Possibly different, if you can see, Micronesia was different waves of different Austronesian groups at different times. Some earlier waves, maybe a little bit later groups there. A lot of islands and archipelagos all throughout Micronesia. Melanesia is sort of near Oceania, sometimes they call it. New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Fiji is there. And then Polynesia as well, up into Samoa here, and then another wave. This earlier groups called Lapita, we'll look at a little more closely this week, and then another wave about 700 AD. This last part of sort of far Oceania is settled. So how did people come? And again, there's two sort of probably complementary, I wouldn't say competing theories for how humans spread along these ways. Obviously, they had to devise advanced technological navigation techniques, which we know, which have been recreated in the present, of how to navigate open ocean. And when you live there, right, as everything, you get familiar with it. You can see, you can judge clouds, you can judge ocean currents. You can, I mean, obviously the very highly developed astronomy, knowing the stars, being able to go read the sun as well. So there's a lot of techniques. One that was really interesting is that because there's so many islands, you can actually see how waves radiate off islands. So you can, if there's a settle pattern where waves come in, you could trace those wave backs and find these islands off in the distance, which you might not be able to see, right? So, but if there's a consistent wave pattern, you can kind of ride those right into islands. Also, birds. If you see birds, you can typically, unless they're albatrosses, you can typically know that land is there. But there's one, there's sort of the express model here, express train that people would go. That they would go to these larger islands first. And settle on these more hospitable islands. And so you just kind of go until you found something, you kind of bounce, and we found an island that worked for you. You would then set up shop, and then slowly go and populate sort of the smaller islands. So that's called the express train migration pattern. So you go quickly, and then there's also the idea of the slow boat migration pattern, or you kind of island hop as you go. Go to an island, set up, bring some people, set up your what you need, plants, animals. We'll look at that a little bit later on, and then kind of make your way slowly over this. And since we are talking thousands of years of settlement, probably a mixture of both of these happened. Some people went and kept spreading quickly, find big things, and then spread back. Others maybe went a little bit slower. What we do know is that humans populated all of these islands. Any place that could be lived in, humans did live in it. Again, just kind of look at these places in a little more depth. Here is Micronesia, 4 major archipelagos, the Chamorros, federal states of Micronesia. Here's the Marshall Islands, Kiribati, Pohnpei, we'll see a little bit later, Khorsai. We'll see that one of the early sort of unification of these islands took place in Khorsai. Palau, Yap, just kind of Chamorro. That's their own sort of language family up there. So you can kind of get an idea of the many different areas of Micronesia. A lot of these are very small atolls that can be inhabited, and you can see even today that the ones that support larger populations people live on. So the major archipelagos, Caroline Islands, Palau, Yap there, Gilbert Islands, Kiribati, Mariana Islands, Chamorro, and then the Marshall Islands over here. So again, this area might be a little more conducive to the slow boat expansion because these islands there's multiple, so you just kind of go from island to island, see what's there, and then ones that were able to be developed, people would settle there. Melanesia, New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, they're kind of interesting. That they think that there's sort of a mixture between there's an early phase of peoples who inhabited New Guinea and ultimately into Australia, maybe about 50,000 years ago. So they think Melanesia is sort of a remnants of this mixture of this some earlier waves of people. We'll get into that a little bit. We look at indigenous peoples of Australia with these later Austronesians. So Melanesia is maybe a mixture of these two different groups. But you can see sort of the chieftains there. Again, these island lifestyles. I mean, New Guinea is a huge island. Again, thousands of one, and again, another one of the most linguistically diverse places in the world. Solomon, New Caledonia is huge. Vanuatu, Fiji, all of these worlds there. And then Polynesia, which I think people are familiar with, Samoa, Tonga, Cook Islands, Tahiti, Rapa Nui, Hawaii, Aotearoa, New Zealand settled last here. But there's a lot of cultural uniques there, or sort of common, sort of cultural affinities. I mean, these Maui stories. There's Maui pulling up the islands. Rapa Nui is very famous for their Mao, I think these are called. A lot of tattooing is very part of this Polynesian world. Here you have sort of again, these nice islands. I think this is Tahiti there. So that's these Austronesian expansions. So by about 3,000 to 1,000 for 500 BC, a majority of Oceania has been settled by humans. Not all of it, but a majority. And we'll look at one group that kind of came to Polynesia, the Lapita, the next part of this lecture.